this
100%.
season or bust. He's probably not going to want to listen to anything I say here, but the truth is, he's going to want to get younger this offseason. Is Derek Carr one of these quarterbacks?
They're not. Another hint, player B is having a resurgence.
Alrighty, what is up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Death by Dynasty. And we're going to get right into it as we're in the fantasy playoffs right now. So a lot of teams either excited or just looking ahead towards the future. We're going to have you covered with all that. We're going to go through some of our playoff matchups in our league and what that might look like if you have a similar makeup on your team. And we're going to be talking about the predictions for those matchups and what those teams might be looking to do next in this off season, where their team goes from here. Obviously contenders this season. Are they contenders next season? What do they need to do? What's their next moves? And we'll be looking at Tyler and my team as well, which we were not contenders, or at least we didn't make the playoffs this season. And
I was
so
fighting. I was fighting for a while in there.
yeah, I didn't want to say that you weren't a contender. I definitely wasn't a contender. I was rebuilding from the very start, but I didn't want to say you weren't a contender, but you didn't make the playoffs at least.
I'll be honest, I had more wins than I should have. People were giving me so much at the end of the year when we were doing power rankings and people were putting me at like 6 or 7. I was putting myself at like 11. I was like, I'm not trying to do anything right now. I don't have the pieces to win right now.
I
But
just feel like
yeah.
there was a lot of like up and down in our league this year. A lot of teams like evened out into like the middle area, and that's kind of where everyone sat. Kind of like how the NFL is right now too. But yeah, I mean, we're gonna go into it right now. So I'll have up on screen for the people to see the matchups here. Team name is Daddy Shark. Okay, and he's going against Dunks here, whose team name is Couple of
I was like, why
Chubbies.
do I not see him? I realized because
Yeah, the new matchups for the week aren't in here yet as we're recording. But okay, so for these two teams, first of all, Chubby's beat Daddy Shark week 13, 173.7 to 112. I mean, I do think that it was kind of just one of those weeks where one team just dominates. He probably would
I
have
think
beaten
that's a
everybody.
fluke. I think I'm just gonna say a straight up Lathan's team. I don't see a world where he doesn't win. He should win. His team is the most dominant. We'll get into what his team actually is, but I'm just gonna start this off right now and saying that his team at full strength, fully constructed, it's one of the more dominant fantasy teams I've seen. Big reason why I've been trying to kind of look more towards the future because my team was okay, and I thought at the beginning of the year had a shot, but just the way his team is right now, it's honestly unreal. And if he loses, it's bad luck because I mean, fantasy, you got it. Like it is lucky at points. So, of course, in the past, it's not been so lucky for him, but um, I think we should start with his team and just show what type of powerhouse of a current dynasty team he has.
Yeah, definitely. You're gonna see his team right over here. but but somewhere on the right side over here. But yeah, I mean he picked up Derrick Henry during this season. He has Dalvin Cook, Patrick Mahomes, all these guys, obviously huge name guys that perform pretty much every single week. They're putting up points. You almost never get a down week for some of these guys. If it's a down week for them, it's still a solid week. I mean, Mike Evans is his only kind of weak point right now with how that offense has been
But
operating
like
this
to say
season.
Mike Evans is a weak point is insane.
And he's
Like
got Saquon Barkley, so he probably makes tough decisions on who to even start. His depth and his bench is deep as well. So I agree that honestly, what puts it over the edge for me is that when you look at Chubby's team, and obviously if Jalen Hurts doesn't go this week, that's I'm like Jalen Hurts has been a huge part of his run this season. And so if Hurts doesn't go, even if Hurts does go, I don't know how much he's going to be running, how much he's going to be, they're probably going to avoid him taking hits, things like that.
he has Tua though. Like I mean, he has some good other. I mean, honestly, straight up, if Jalen doesn't play and Gardner Minshew plays, Gardner Minshew's not a bad start in any situation.
I love that Gardner Minshew, he's always trying to ball out. He's always trying to
He's
prove
ready
a
to
point.
play.
He
That's
thinks
what I
he's a
mean.
starter in the NFL, which I don't think he is. But on those days where he comes out and he wants to prove it, I mean, he does look pretty good. And I will say this is a tough week for him with like his college coach passing away and having that on his shoulders. I actually think that he's going to want to go out there and just absolutely ball out more than
He's
ever.
just
So
a
I
football
actually do,
guy.
I do. And Tua, like, I think that's a tough decision right now. I mean, Tua is on paper the better player to start in your fantasy league, but Tua's been kind of down lately. That offense has kind of not been what they were earlier in the season. So yeah, I mean Gardner Minshew, I mean he's got the receivers as well. I don't know. That's a tough go for me either way. It's still neither of them are Jalen Hurts and what he's been this year, even from a fantasy standpoint. So I will say I do think Dunks is good. I do think he could win this week, but I think that like losing Jalen Hurts is a big reason why I gave um Laughing the Edge. That is, I keep calling them by multiple names here, but that's why I gave Daddy Chark the edge there. Um, calling them by their actual name, their team names, their team nicknames. But I will say this. So I really think that, like we're talking about how good Laughing's team is. I really think his team is good, but I also think that he might be at his team very well could be winning the championship this year. But
Should.
it also
Should
might
win the
be
championship.
at its absolute peak. Like this might be his peak. Like this
100%.
season or bust basically for him right now.
I mean,
Because
I think he'll compete. I mean, he has like Josh Jacobs young, or whoops, my bad. I'm still on. Let me pull him back up. This is
he's
tough
got
going here.
Cook, he's got Derrick
Yeah, I mean, he
Henry.
is getting up there. You're not wrong there.
Here's the thing:
Um,
his team next year could be good. It very likely will be good. But another thing that I'm seeing from him, he's got Patrick Mahomes. That's fantastic. We're moving to a super flex next season. He doesn't really have another quarterback right now, and he has Fisher's first round pick. So it's probably going to be a pretty mid first round pick. But for me, we talked about this before. You got guys like Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, DeAndre Hopkins. From we'll start with those two running backs there for starters. It just feels like one of these guys is gonna either get injured next year or have a down year. It just feels like it's inevitable that one of them is, even though any one of them could still continue to ball out, but any one of them could get hurt, could have a down year. We're talking about Dalvin Cook, who's 27, Derrick Henry, who's 28. Less important from a wide receiver standpoint. Devontae Adams, 29. I mean, he's still obviously fantastic. But DeAndre Hopkins at 30 years old, he's already not what he used to be. And Mike Evans also not what he used to be as well. So, and then you got the guy like Saquon Barkley. He's only 25, but and he's had a great bounce back year, but he's had his injuries. So I really think if I'm Laughing, it is what it is right now. You're in the playoffs. You might consider hopefully you win this year. Hopefully you go win the championship. The funny thing is with Laughing, I'll know he'll be watching this. And I also know that he's probably not going to want to listen to anything I say here. But the truth is he's going to want to get younger this offseason. He really is, because his team is win now. And I would trade away a guy like Mike Evans this offseason, and I would try to get younger. And maybe he still can win next season as well. But either way, what happens if he just tries to hold off for one more full season? Then the value of these guys all drop. So that's how my thought process is on him. A couple of last thoughts really quick here. Uh,
for what it's worth, Derrick Henry and Mike Evans and Christian Kirk were all on my team to start this year. And a lot of where I was going with that is I didn't think I could compete at this time, and I was like you're saying, I feel like they are at that limit with like Derrick Henry. It's really like he's still performing really well, and one mistake I did make this year is being really reactionary at the start of the year, because going into the year I was nervous that Derrick Henry wasn't going to be to his same level, especially coming off the injury at the end of last year. And then just he had a bad couple games to start the year, so I just wanted to get value for him. So being able to get a first out of it was something I wanted to do. So I did that, and then same with Mike Evans. It's just once Brady's out too, it's it's hard to say what he's going to be. He's getting up there,
Yeah, what
and
is that? We have
just
no
one
idea
heck
what
of a
that
baller.
offense is going to look like next year. Yeah, Mike Evans is already a guy I would have.
Christian Kirk, though, that I'm kicking myself. He's nice.
I traded him to you, so I hear you.
We have a
Yeah,
couple. We had a couple of those.
couple of those, and that happens. It was a bad move by my part, but I will say a couple last thoughts on this matchup really quickly here. For a couple of chubbies, like his QB situation, we talked about it a little bit already. It's fantastic having Jalen Hurts and then Tua, and then who knows, Gardner could be a starter somewhere
For
next
what
year.
it's worth, and I want to make this clear, Jalen Hurts could start this week. I don't. I would say maybe like 49% chance he'll start. I think more likely than not he won't. But the way him and Nick Sirianni were talking today, they seem like confused as to why people are acting like he's not playing this weekend. And the other thing too is Jalen just holds himself so well, though he no matter what, he makes you feel confident coming out of the interview. But I I wouldn't, for people who are planning for the championship, don't count on Jalen being out. I wouldn't uh be nervous in this situation. I think he's gonna be able to play, especially if he doesn't play this week. I think he goes out there in New Orleans to not only get I say us as an Eagles fan, get a draft pick and clinch that 1 seed too, as well as the
Absolutely.
division.
Yeah. They said he might play, so we'll see if he does play. I don't. Final say, I think that Daddy Chark wins this, just like you said. But if Hertz is out there, I do think that Chubbies could win this game. And here's my uh final thing that I'll say is that you actually did make a great trade because you traded him Mike Evans earlier this season. So props to you for that.
Appreciate that.
All right. We're going to now move on here to uh, Louisville Yuggers versus uh versus Peter Stages. Okay.
Shout out
Um
Peter Stages.
Peter Stages making a statement in his first matchup, beating the reigning champion. But okay, here we got another week 13 matchup. They also played, and Grove beat uh Yuggers beat Stages 112 to 74. So again, that's just like a bad down week for Stages there, Peter Stages himself. But it's still, I do think that Yuggers is the better team. Really got to give him props for the way he built his team because he just came on as a new owner like 2 years ago, something like that. Um, I believe Lamar Jackson is coming back for him this week. That's huge for him.
Is he?
One, he could be coming back. Yeah. Week 16, correct? Sleeper has points projected for him, so
Matt just
um,
keeping him on the bench for safekeeping.
yeah, I mean his other quarterback option, Geno Smith, not an awful option. Again, that offense hasn't been clicking the same way it did earlier in the season. He does also have Brock Purdy for whatever that's worth. Um, but I will say this: Yuggers is really wide receiver heavy, and his wide receivers are absolutely dominant. Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs, he's got AJ Brown. His running backs are not as strong, and then it's the flip there for Stages. His running backs are dominant in Christian McCaffrey. He's got James Conner. He's got
I
Alvin
think
Kamara.
I'm not. I have Kamara in my redraft league, and Kamara is a player who, honestly, if I would have advanced, which is a little bit of a touchy spot for me because I lost by point 0.5, and I could go on a 5-minute rant right now on how overrated Justin Herbert is because he lost me that game, and he's probably not overrated, but I can't stand him now after that. But either way, uh, sorry, where was I going with that? Can you remind me there?
Alvin Kamara. Alvin
Alvin
Kamara.
Kamara, yeah, sorry, yeah, he was on my team. He's another reason I lost. I probably would have benched him last week too, or if I would have advanced, I would bench him next week because he's just someone you can't count on. And if you have other players that you can count on, it's a risk, 100%. And honestly, don't listen to this advice. You could bench Alvin Kamara next week and feel okay because this was a perfect situation for him this week, because he didn't have Mark Ingram there. He has players out. It was gonna be a situation where he should get a lot of touches. And he just hasn't been performing. He hasn't been getting the touchdowns, and he hasn't been used the same way he has been in the past. So he's a player who, if you're feeling ballsy and you have some players on your bench that you think could give it a go, like a Garrett Wilson type player, maybe a player who you have just stacked up there, who is that boomer bust player like a Zay Jones, who, like for Matt, if Matt gets a big game out of Zay Jones, he's moving on. His receivers are loaded. I think those are consistent there, and if he plays like he did last week, he's set. But I think those are all types of players you could play over Kamara. But as far as this matchup goes, I think uh I think Matt has this one just with the receivers. They're too consistent. They're gonna get you the points. I think Peter Stages can put up a ton of points. I think that he's more of a boomer bust type player, like as kind of goes hand in hand with what I'm saying with Kamara, is that he has a good team, but I think he's gonna need an all-time game to be able to beat Matt, who Matt's gonna put up that 125, 130 almost every single week with those types of players, especially how all those players are playing right now.
Yeah, it's another one of those things where like a lot of these
Pardon me,
teams
you guys can listen to Dan while I blow my nose real quick. I'll be right back.
a lot of these teams are really stacked. Um, but like Tyler just said, the wide receivers that Yuggers has, they're dominant wide receivers. When you look at what Peter Stages has, yeah, they're big name running backs. These are the names we hear year after year balling out. But they're running backs that have had issues that could be a little bit streaky, that have been streaky at points this season. Like obviously having weapons like Kelsey and stuff like that is still huge, and he could still put up huge numbers. But most likely, I do agree with you, Tyler, that Yuggers will have that one. Johnson again this offseason, like he needs QB help. And I I don't know what his draft situation is. I want to go to his team really quickly because I don't think he owns a first round pick this season. And he's another guy who, yeah, he does not. He owns a 2024 first. He's another guy who I really think needs to get younger. Guys like James Conner, who's had an up and down career. You keep Christian McCaffrey, but we said this before. If you're 27, 28 years old, he's going to be 27 next season. It might be time to think about moving on from him. And Alvin Kamara, same thing. Who knows what Kamara's situation looks like? He's got a court date this offseason and everything like that.
He may not even play next year.
Yeah. So if you can manage to move him, do it as soon as possible because you might get whatever you get from him now, you might not be able to get much at all later on. But yeah, same thing. I just think that Peter Stages here needs some QB help. Tom Brady, who knows, and then Deshaun Watson is coming back, and he could be a solid QB for you, but moving to super flex, he's going to want to go get another QB this offseason. He does not have much in that situation. He drafted Malik Willis this past draft. Don't know if Malik Willis is really shaping out to be much. So
I expected more out of him.
Yeah, I was excited for him too, and he got a couple chances and didn't seem like much. So
Even this week he played.
all
I
right,
thought Tannehill was way more hurt than he was.
yeah, for sure. And I'm surprised that they kept sticking with Tannehill, but I guess we're not seeing what they're seeing in practice. Clearly, he's their best option. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's tough to draft quarterbacks, but it's tough in the NFL and it's tough in Dynasty. But you got to go do it. And speaking of drafting quarterbacks, which is something that I am strongly considering, we're going to take a look at my team right now. And I finished 4-10. I finished 10th out of 12 in our league. Like I said, we're moving to a super flex next season. So one thing that I do have in my favor is 3 first-round picks this season. I believe it's going to be a third, a 6th, and a 7th, I believe. And then I have 2 first-round picks next season as well. I plan on getting a quarterback early in that draft, and I plan on getting a couple weapons as well. One thing I will not trade away, I will not be trading away Travis Etienne or Kyle Pitts. Still kind of like Travis Etienne had another good week this week, rushed for over 100 yards. I think that offense is just going through ups and downs, and hopefully that he'll look as solid as his ceiling is still astronomical. So hopefully he gets close to that next season. Kyle Pitts, I'm still big on him. I'm definitely not selling him at his lowest value because this will be his lowest value yet. obviously with the season-ending injury that he faced. I am going to go look for a 2024 first. And I'm definitely willing to trade away Deontay Foreman, Tyler Boyd. I'm really willing to trade away anyone who's not Travis Etienne and Kyle Pitts. However, I do really like Donovan Peoples-Jones for next year.
Love him.
I'm interested in
Love
Nico
Donovan.
Collins,
Donovan Peoples-Jones.
and that's kind of where my team stands. I would trade away Curtis Samuel as well. But all right, lay it on me. What do you got for me?
You know, I'm gonna be honest. I think you're in a good spot. I think you could tell that you're planning. You could tell that you're not just winging it, that you have a plan. I think Pitts was an absolute killer for you. If we're gonna be
I
honest.
really thought he was going to be better this season, but Marcus Mariota hates him for some reason. I don't know.
And
And
I
he's
know
bad.
I'm pretty sure I offered 2 or 3 firsts before the season because people thought he was like the next fantasy legend. Like people were
Yeah.
saying that he was
People
like
were offering me multiple first.
people were saying take him in the first round in redraft leagues.
Yeah,
Um, E- ETN obviously is good. He's gonna be a stud. I like him a lot. I think Okonkwo maybe best pickup of the year. Like
that's
can't
right.
he's
Forgot about my
continues to
guy,
perform.
Chigozium Okonkwo.
Every single week he performs, and because I'll have the Titans game on, Titans, correct?
Yep,
Yeah,
Titans.
I was saying
Yeah,
'cause
and
I'll be
he's like
watching.
my backup plan for Kyle Pitts, but he could still be a low-level flex either way.
He's scoring touchdowns. I love Peoples Jones. I think he's a star. Like he's performed. Curtis Samuel, great guy to have on your team. Gets carries, receptions. But
But
this is a
Curtis
big
Samuel
draft for
doesn't
you.
necessarily need to be in my future.
No, doesn't have to be. I think he's a lot of players I think that we have, because I'm in a very similar situation, can be used to our advantage, being able to um, take advantage of teams who are trying to win now and trying to maybe get a pick or two extra out of it. I think ultimately a huge your future kind of comes down to this draft and then obviously next year's draft as well, because then I noticed I don't think you have very much after that as far as draft picks go. So you have 3 picks this year in the first round, so those are going to be some big picks. So I'm sure you're spending that time uh taking a look at the combine and to making your way over to watch some of the combine to make sure you're getting the right players, right?
I am extremely excited for this draft, and I just really hope I can hit on a quarterback because it's so hard to do. And I'm gonna have to be patient again. I'm gonna have to wait it out. But if you think that I'm going to pick up at least let's hope that I pick up one elite player this draft. I have 2 first round picks next year, hoping to add a third 2024 by trading away some of those packages of players that I named. And if I get one elite player in that draft as well, you pair those guys with ETN and Pitts. All those guys are hopefully in their prime right around the same time, all going to be young players. It's all kind of hopes and dreams right now, but it could come together for me. I'm also not opposed to trading away a first and a couple players to go get a quarterback as well. It's so hard. When you draft a quarterback, that's the lowest value you're ever going to get for a quarterback in a super flex league. It's also the hardest way to get a successful quarterback. So I could, you're going to have to buy, you're going to have to almost in a sense overpay to go get a quarterback that is good, but then you have that guy that can be your QB1, maybe QB2. I mean, right now Kirk Cousins would be my QB2 hopefully in this
That's not a bad
scenario. And
QB2.
it's not a bad QB2 at all. It's just that I'm lacking any other QB basically at this point in time. So we'll see.
I think as far as the Superflex goes, it's so new to all of us, and I'm sure all of our 16 listeners right now, I'm sure there's one of them out there who they've done a Superflex league before and probably know. But I feel like there's going to be more opportunities than we think that we're going to have to play a position player there because there's just not enough quarterbacks. Some teams are loaded with them because I've gone through teams when I'm like, oh, I need to go make a trade and get a quarterback. And I look at them like they're in a bad situation too. And there's
Mhm.
like 2 or 3 teams that have quarterbacks and they're not giving them up. I'll inquire and I'll be asking for something that, which I get because there's like they're in a great situation. But from my side, I can't even begin to work in a lot of it.
Yeah, that's why I think this league is going to get shuffled around a little bit next year, like strictly based on your QB situation. And I don't think that the QB is going to be everything, but if you just simply like don't have that second QB, then it's not going to work out well. All right, Tyler, let's get to your team really quickly here,
Yes.
and go through what your thoughts are on for the future.
So I'm gonna just start off by saying that we are in no way where we thought we would be right now. If you were to ask me 6 months ago, coming into this season, I remember talking with some of my fellow uh, GMs of other teams around the league and telling them that I'm really happy and we're talking, shaking hands, saying see you in the playoffs, and that's not where we are right now. So we're not happy with that, but at the same time, I love where we're at for the future. I've traded away some stars, as I mentioned earlier, with Daddy Chark's team. I had Derrick Henry. I am kicking myself a little bit. I definitely could have got more, but I don't regret it. I got a pick out of it, a first round pick that I'm going to be able to use to be able
You're
to
better with that
get
first
younger.
round pick than having Derrick Henry moving into next season.
I wasn't because at that time I wasn't making the playoffs, so now I'm able to get younger right away. And I'm someone who thinks the quicker you can get better, you should do it. You don't want to take time if you can get better now. Uh, it like I said, it didn't go as planned, but I have a lot of young potential. I have Ayuk. I got him in a trade late in the year. Rashad White came on strong at the end of the year. Same with Christian Watson. Two players who Rashad White, I knew he was long term from the start, but Christian Watson was a player who fell in the draft because I know he didn't perform as well as they thought he would right off the bat. So at training camp and whatnot. So I was able to get him at a bargain price, and I remember I was getting offers for a third round pick for him come trade deadline, and I was very close to taking it. Again, I need to learn to be a little less reactionary with things, especially with 22, 23-year-old players. And I'm glad I didn't because he's turned out to be a really, really good player, adding Lazard to the team as well. So I am happy where we're at. Even Zeke, I think he's a player who I really do see he's a player who the Cowboys are just going to use. They're going to get him goal line carries. Pollard, I love him too. I had him in my redraft league. He always performs. But Zeke, he's a player who he's just a consistent guy. He's going to get touches. He gets the yards. Uh,
He's
North to south
probably
type of guy.
underrated now at this
Uh,
point.
Honestly, I think he is at this point because he's a player who gets overlooked because of Tony Pollard. And I mean, people don't like the Cowboys in general, so it's easy
But if
to
you
hate
could
on a guy
get
like
good
that.
value for him, he might be a guy you'd consider trading this offseason just because you've gotten so much great value from him because you fleeced me front and back on Zeke. So if you could go get a second for him, you might consider it. If you can get more, if you could get more than a second, I would take it in a heartbeat. But
Yeah, I think so.
Christian Watson is your one guy that you absolutely are going to build around. Like, good for you for having that young wide receiver. It feels good to have a young wide receiver as opposed to a young running back just because of their shelf lives. And then you've got a lot of solid QB2s as well, I think. And that's pretty
But at the
good.
same time, they could all be out of the league in like 2 years, which is really scary. I I will say the fact that I was able to get Heineke off waivers for very cheap, I was shocked by because I think I mean, he's a little older than you would expect, but at the same time, people like him. The locker room obviously loves him. That's
Yeah,
why
they
they've
do.
stuck with him so long.
Yeah. So I mean, for you, don't trade away those QBs yet, but maybe if you can get
Excuse me.
somebody who once you figure out what their QB situation is heading into the next season, then maybe you can consider trading away one of your other QBs potentially. Although it's a shaky situation with these guys, and you never know who's going to get hurt or benched or whatever it might be mid-season. Nonetheless, I think you have QBs that you can eventually trade away. Not yet. Wait that out a little bit. And then you got a lot of draft picks as well. So you're sitting in a good spot with the draft picks as well. And
It's gonna be a ritual each episode. The
I
switch
know
of
it is.
the
I know.
switch.
But I'll just switch it to the other thing. But yeah, I wouldn't trade away those draft picks unless you're getting like a superstar QB or young, but also proven talent as well. So
I have pieces. Like I said, for your team, I think that this year's huge for the draft. If we can get good players, and I really do think the more and more research I do, there's some talented players, especially in a super flex. It's beneficial because quarterbacks go way earlier than in other leagues. So we're able to get some high level running backs and wide receivers way later than we would have if it was our regular league because you're able to wait on quarterbacks. But even so, in the last few drafts, people have been taking quarterbacks pretty early too uh to in anticipation of this year.
all right. end it. We'll do more of this moving forward because I'll have one for you maybe next week. But give me some stats for two players. Blind stats here. Blind stats.
Okay, here we go.
I'm gonna try to write it down.
Player A is 29 years old. And these are both quarterbacks. And I'm going to preface this by saying these are two quarterbacks that have very similar stats, but one, when I say the rankings, you're going to be very surprised. The yards per attempt for player A is 7.6 yards per attempt, 257 yards per game, has an interception rate of 1.9, a touchdown percentage of 5%. And they've scored 16.4 fantasy points per game this year. Reason I chose those stats were ones that I feel like those are ones that you want to look at when you are looking at a quarterback in fantasy. Player B, moving on to player B. Player B is 28 years old, so a year younger. Has 7.4 yards per attempt, 257 yards per game, almost exact, literally 0.6 more. And these are career. The only one that is for this year is the fantasy points per game. Should have prefaced that. My apologies. Interception percentage 2.1%, touchdown percentage 4.4%, and fantasy points per game this year 16.1. Player A is a two-time Pro Bowl Rookie of the Year. Player B is a two-time Pro Bowler and also has the record for most completions in a regular season game.
Okay.
Two career-wise great quarterbacks. I know that's a lot of information.
It's a lot of information. What'd you say? Wait, what'd you say the fantasy points were for player B?
Player B was 16.1. And I'll kind of start to talk about each player more, and I think you'll be able to pick up who each of them are as I start to give more hints. Unless you want to, do you want to give it a shot first?
I'll give it a shot on A. It is A. No, maybe that's two. Ryan Tannehill.
It is not Ryan Tannehill for player A.
Okay.
I will say player A. Now, here, I'll give you a hint. I'm going to give you the rankings for each player.
Okay.
Player A on Sleeper for Dynasty Keeper Leagues, or on Fantasy Pros, excuse me, is ranked 12th for quarterbacks. Player B is ranked 23rd.
Okay. Is Derek Carr one of these quarterbacks?
They're not. Another hint, player B is having a resurgence of a year. He's had a couple off years, but he is performing really well this year, and I think is a player that people should be starting to take a look at.
Okay, what quarterback is having a kind of a bounce back year?
The whole team in general is having a bounce back. Isn't even the right word.
Okay, so player B is Jared Goff.
Indeed.
Indeed
it is.
I actually traded Jared Goff for Kirk Cousins straight up last season, and
that's not a horrible trade especially at the time.
Last year, Kirk Cousins performed better. This year, Jared Goff's a little bit better. They're probably fairly even quarterbacks. All right.
Can you believe he's ranked 23rd quarterback though in Dynasty?
Yeah, that's kind of crazy, and he's got weapons too. And
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm like, oh well, he must not have weapons. I'm like, nah, he has Amon-Ra, he has Jameson Williams, who's one of the best he will be one of the best deep threats in the league. He has Khalif Raymond. He has receivers.
I think that they were at one point considering drafting a QB, but they might still draft a QB. Jared Goff is still going to be their starter, probably to start.
He will be somewhere at some point.
If not, yeah, he'll start somewhere. He is a starting quarterback in this league, and I think that he was at one point, and maybe still is underrated when he got traded from the Rams and they went and won a Super Bowl. That made him look bad, but I think he would have won a Super Bowl with that team too. They stacked the entire team.
I mean, Stafford played amazing, but at the same time, Stafford this year was not the best.
All right, who's player A really quickly?
Dak Prescott.
Okay. See, I like Jared Goff, and both of those guys are kind of mid-tier QBs, but
being ranked 12th and 23rd,
yeah,
that's a big difference between the two.
Less than a first for sure. All right, we are out of time. We'll get more into those type of things in the future weeks, but either way, follow us on Instagram, subscribe to us on YouTube, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for another great week. We'll see you all next week.
See ya.